The void beyond the stars is not empty. It is a darkness stitched with the echoes of a billion lives, each one fragile, fleeting, and yet, somehow, screaming for meaning. Within that endless night, the Imperium of man stretches like a cathedral of steel and faith, a fortress against the abyss, yet its walls are riddled with secrets, whispered in the clang of the manufactorums and the hiss of the Prometheum vents. To try and flee its grasp is to challenge everything the Emperor's light has wrought, to defy the Astronomicon, to sail blind across the warp, and to tempt forces that see flesh as a weakness and will as a delight. What happens when a mortal dares to escape the Imperium? Will they find freedom, or merely a new cage constructed of shadows older than the stars themselves? If the lure of the unknown calls to you, then steel your mind, ready your senses, and linger in the story to come. Subscribe to join the voyage, like to pledge your curiosity to the Emperor's light, and share this journey with those who dare to question the boundaries of human dominion. The air inside the manufactorum was thick with the tang of ozone and burning promethium, a scent that clawed at the throat and settled in the lungs like dust from a ruined city. Machines groaned in measured rhythm, stamping and forging with a relentless precision that mocked human frailty. Even here, far from the front lines, the Imperium's weight was tangible, pressing against the shoulders, pressing into the soul. Servitors shuffled through the corridors, their eyes replaced with red lenses, their lips sealed in silent devotion to the cogitators that dictated every moment of their existence. To live among them was to know the relentless certainty of order, where spontaneity was a heresy and hesitation a death sentence. Corporal Valen cries moved between the assembly lines with the practiced ease of someone who had forgotten the meaning of free thought. His boots clanged against steel gratings, each echo a reminder that sound itself belonged to the manufactorum, not him. He was young, though the grind of duty had carved years into his expression, the hard line of jaw, the hollowed shadows beneath his eyes. The vox grill attached to his chest crackled, issuing orders and reprimands from a superior whose voice he had never met, yet whose presence he felt in every tightened sinew of his body. The Imperium demanded obedience, but it also demanded more, the surrender of curiosity, the sacrifice of memory, the erasure of hope. He paused at a bank of servo tables, watching the Skitarii limb cycles methodically attach power conduits to a batch of war servitors. The rhythm of labor was hypnotic, but it brought no solace. A distant clang, the vibration running up through the floor, reminded him that even here, the universe outside pressed upon the walls. Whispers traveled through the air ducts, faint but persistent, rumors of a starport beyond the manufactorum, of lives lived beyond the Emperor's immediate gaze. Such thoughts were dangerous, but they were also irresistible. Valen's gaze lifted to the observation balcony. There, behind reinforced plasteel, a custodian guard patrolled in perfect silence, their golden armor catching the dim glow of arc lamps like fragments of the Emperor's own light. They moved with the certainty of inevitability, a constant reminder that even the slightest deviation from protocol could be met with swift, unyielding force. No one in the manufactorum could hide. No one could hope to escape. And yet, as he watched the guard's reflection ripple across the polished floor, a stubborn ember of defiance stirred in Valen's chest. The midday bell, a deep, resonant clang, marked the moment when all labor ceased for ration distribution. Men and women lined the aisles with hollow eyes, trays in hand, their whispers swallowed by the din of machinery. The food was barely sustenance, thick slops of gruel and nutrient pastes, cold and bitter, but it was enough to keep them alive, tethered to the Imperium's will. Valen accepted his portion without thought, though his mind wandered, as it always did, to the forbidden spaces between the manufactorum's walls, to the corridors that led to maintenance shafts and service tunnels no one was meant to walk. A sudden alarm jolted the assembly line, a shrill klaxon that made the blood in his ears roar. Red warning lights flooded the room. Servitors froze mid-task, their limbs locked in unnatural angles. The custodian on the balcony raised his glaive, scanning for the source, unyielding and absolute. Valen felt a rush of both fear and exhilaration. This was the Imperium asserting itself, reminding him of its omnipresence. And yet, the chaos it created offered a fleeting glimpse of possibility, a crack in the armor of inevitability. He moved quickly, slipping through the shadows as other laborers cowered under the watchful eyes of the armored sentries. Every step was calculated, measured, the echo of his boots swallowed in the roar of claxons and machinery. Somewhere deep within the manufactorum, a hidden maintenance door yielded with a quiet hiss. Beyond it lay darkness and the scent of oil-soaked metal, corridors rarely traversed by human eyes. Valen's pulse raced, his mind alive with the dangerous thrill of potential freedom, yet haunted by the knowledge that at any moment, the custodian could turn the corner and end the dream before it began. In that darkness, he could almost hear the distant hum of the Astronomicon, a pale, steady light that guided ships across the warp, unreachable yet omnipresent. Perhaps it was a cruel joke of fate, that even as one considered escape, the Imperium's eye watched, silent and eternal. Yet the whispers persisted, faint as a prayer. There was more beyond the manufactorum, more beyond the cage, more than the endless grind of metal and faith. He gripped the edge of the maintenance hatch and let himself drop into the tunnel, the sound of his fall absorbed by the hollow steel, swallowed by shadows. For a moment, he was alone, and the universe felt vast, terrible, and free. A sudden vibration underfoot reminded him that the Imperium did not forgive hesitation. Somewhere, deep in the bowels of the manufactorum, alarms shifted and pulsed like the heartbeat of a giant. But Valen's mind, sharpened by years of oppression, was clear. Survival was not just a hope, it was a strategy, a mental map traced through fear, instinct, and a stubborn flicker of defiance. He pressed forward, the tunnel narrowing, the shadows thickening, yet each step pulled him further from the cage that had defined his life. Each step was a rebellion, each breath a stolen act of autonomy. Even here, even in the dark, he could feel the eyes of the custodian's golden presence, watching, weighing, judging. Escape was impossible, and yet impossibility had never stopped men from trying. The tunnel twisted like the inside of some mechanical serpent, lined with cold steel panels that gleamed faintly under the dim glow of emergency lumens. The air was thick with the metallic tang of iron and the faint residue of burnt circuitry. Every inhalation carried the reminder that this place had never been meant for human passage, that the Imperium's architecture was more predator than refuge. Valen's boots made no sound on the grated floor. He had learned to move like a shadow, to let instinct guide him through corridors that seemed to have been designed to trap the unwary. The whisper of machinery from above, the drone of lift servos and conveyor motors, was a constant metronome, counting down the moments of his flight. He paused at a junction, peering into two darkened branches of the tunnel. One led deeper into maintenance zones, narrow and labyrinthine, while the other angled upward toward the faint hum of a data slate control hub he had glimpsed once during a rare maintenance sweep. His instincts, honed by years of suppressing curiosity, told him that the hub was dangerous, patrolled regularly by servitors and Skitarii. Yet the lure of knowledge, even forbidden knowledge, pulled him forward. Information, after all, was freedom in its most intangible form, and the Imperium jealously guarded it with every mechanism at its disposal. Valen chose the left passage, descending further into the bowels of the manufactorum. The walls closed in, and the dim lights flickered like dying stars. Occasionally, a vent hissed, releasing scalding air and the sharp scent of burnt oil. The oppressive silence pressed against him, broken only by the occasional echo of distant machinery or the low hum of a data conduit. In moments like this, the mind begins to play tricks, and Valen almost imagined voices, murmurs of men and women long gone, their spirits bound to the metal skeletons they had built. He shook the thought away, but the feeling lingered, a subtle tremor in the marrow of his bones. Ahead, the tunnel branched into an old servitor chamber, long abandoned, its doors rusted and warning glyphs peeling from their surfaces. Valen slipped inside, the air cooler, carrying the faint scent of mold and decay. He crouched behind a fallen conduit, listening. The distant klaxon of the manufactorum had faded, replaced by the occasional hiss of venting steam and the thrum of life support systems struggling to maintain equilibrium. It was a temporary refuge, but every refuge carries risk. A misstep, a creak of metal, and the custodian's vigilant gaze could be upon him in an instant. He allowed himself a moment to breathe, to let the tension drain from his shoulders. His fingers brushed against a pile of old servitor parts, limbs twisted into unnatural angles, eyes dimmed with age, mouths frozen in silent screams of servitude. The sight was a stark reminder of what awaited those who failed, those who tried to defy the machine of the Imperium. And yet, in that morbid gallery, Valen found a strange reassurance. If these broken husks could no longer serve, perhaps their stories could serve as warnings, as guides for the living. A low vibration shuddered through the floor, and Valen froze. The sense of being hunted was immediate and absolute. Somewhere above, the manufactorum was alive with motion, guards moving, machinery shifting, the faint, rhythmic chant of vox grills echoing like distant prayers. He pressed himself against the wall, heart pounding, listening to the cadence of the complex, learning its rhythm as one learns the heartbeat of an enemy. The custodians, the Skitarii, even the automated security protocols, they all moved in patterns, predictable to those patient enough to watch, to wait. Patience was survival. Observation was freedom. Minutes or perhaps hours passed. Time had lost meaning. In the shadows, Valen allowed himself the smallest indulgence, a thought of the world beyond the manufactorum, of open skies and distant suns, untouched by the crushing weight of Imperial doctrine. Such fantasies were dangerous, potentially lethal if discovered, but they were the only thing keeping the ember of defiance alive. Each memory of what life could be, a simple meal shared in peace, laughter unpoliced by ritual, the warmth of a sun unfiltered by plasteel, was a blade of hope, sharp and forbidden. Finally he rose, moving again through the twisted corridors, letting instinct and memory guide him. Each step was precise, calculated, a dance between visibility and shadow. He avoided service lifts, choosing old access tunnels barely known even to the lowest-ranked tech priests. Every door he passed carried the silent warning of glyphs etched in rusted steel. "Trespassers will be claimed by the Emperor." The phrase echoed in his mind more than words. It was a covenant of fear, an edict of inevitability. Yet Valen did not stop. Each pulse of fear was a confirmation that he was alive, that he was thinking, that he was still human. At the far end of the tunnel, he glimpsed the faint glow of emergency exit markers, a soft, red halo against the cold metal. It was not salvation, he knew that, but it was a promise of something beyond this labyrinth, a threshold that had not been breached for decades. The manufactorum above continued its endless chant, indifferent and eternal, yet here in the shadows, in the smell of metal and decay, Valen felt the first true sensation of freedom, possibility. And yet, even as he pressed forward, a whisper reached his ears, faint and almost drowned by the machinery. The echo of a voice, perhaps imagined, perhaps real, carried through the tunnels. "Do you seek to leave, child of the Imperium?" It was soft, almost prayer-like, but it carried a weight, a knowing that chilled him to the bone. The shadows deepened around him, and the line between salvation and doom blurred. Valen's pulse spiked, his every instinct screaming that he should flee, yet he stayed rooted for a heartbeat, listening. The voice was gone, absorbed into the tunnel's metallic sinews, leaving only the echo of his own breath and the soft hum of the servos. He knew the manufactorum was alive in more ways than one. Its walls seemed to remember, to watch, to judge every movement, every heartbeat that dared to defy its relentless order. And in that instant, Valen understood something fundamental. Escape would not simply be a matter of outrunning men, Skitarii, or even the custodians. It would be a battle against the Imperium itself, against the centuries of iron will and ritual that had shaped every corner of this place. Yet defiance, once kindled, is difficult to extinguish. He pressed forward into the emergency-lit corridor, each step measured, silent, yet brimming with the audacity of a life reclaiming itself. The tunnel narrowed, forcing him to move in a crouch, the metal walls pressing against his shoulders, the smell of scorched circuitry and promethium thickening the air. Every instinct urged caution, but the ember of hope had grown into a small, searing flame. Beyond this corridor, beyond the servitor graveyards, the rusted access panels, and the ever-present gaze of the Imperium, was a threshold. It was uncertain what lay beyond it, perhaps another cage, perhaps a fleeting glimpse of freedom, but the very thought propelled him forward. A distant vibration resonated through the floor, subtle yet insistent, like a heartbeat of iron. Valen paused, pressed flat against the wall, and waited. The sound shifted, a subtle change in frequency, hinting at something massive moving above him. He did not recognize the exact pattern, but it was enough. He moved again, slower now, more deliberate, weaving through maintenance conduits that smelled of oil and age. Each step became a meditation, a negotiation between fear and necessity. The manufactorum had built him to obey, to submit, to serve. But now, in the shadowed arteries of this machine world, he was learning to resist. Eventually, the corridor opened into a chamber that had once been a servitor storage bay. Its doors were rusted, barely hanging on their hinges, and the air was damp with decades of condensation. Rust flakes drifted in motes across the dim light, shimmering like tiny, forgotten stars. Valen stepped inside, every sense alert. The chamber was silent, yet there was a presence, something unquantifiable, that made the hairs along his neck stand on end. It was a reminder that the Imperium was never far away, that even in the quiet, even in the hidden places, the machinery of domination pulsed with life. He reached out, touching a cold steel support beam, grounding himself against the immensity of it all. For a long moment, he allowed himself a small, forbidden thought: he could survive this. He could slip through the cracks, through the corridors that time and oversight had neglected. He could move beyond the manufactorum, beyond the planets, beyond the stars as the Imperium knew them. And perhaps, just perhaps, he could find something resembling freedom. But even as he thought it, a subtle dread crept into his chest. Escape would be only the first battle. The universe beyond the Imperium's grasp was no kinder, no safer. Rogue psychers, orc raiders, Necron tomb worlds, all lay in wait. The freedom he sought was never simple, never guaranteed, and it carried costs far beyond imagination. The thought sharpened his resolve. Survival, he realized, was no longer a passive act of endurance. It was a decision, every breath a choice, every heartbeat a challenge to the Imperium's claim on him. With careful precision, he moved to the chamber's exit, pushing open the corroded hatch that led into the final access corridor. The red glow of emergency lights cast long shadows across the walls, elongating his figure into something larger than himself, a phantom of defiance stretching across the steel floor. As he stepped forward, the chamber behind him seemed to sigh, the metallic walls echoing the passage of one who dared to defy. The manufactorum's endless din returned, a low, insistent reminder of what he had left behind, yet the echo of possibility followed him like a second skin. Somewhere ahead, the distant glow of a starport or hidden maintenance exit awaited, uncertain, dangerous, but undeniably real. Valen pressed on, heart thrumming, mind sharpened, the shadows closing in but never quite consuming him. Above, somewhere beyond the reinforced ceilings, the custodian guard continued its endless vigil, the golden armor catching the light in a manner both magnificent and terrifying. Somewhere, in the higher corridors of command, the vox grills crackled, unseen eyes scanned the manufactorum, yet here, in the narrow veins of shadowed steel, one man had begun to reclaim what the Imperium sought to claim entirely: the audacity to hope. And so, with each careful step, Valen cries moved beyond the crushing cage. Beyond the immediate, the predictable, the suffocating order of Imperial life. He moved toward uncertainty, toward danger, toward the whisper of the void and the promise of something more. The manufactorum behind him remained eternal, relentless, yet he had slipped its grasp, if only for a moment. In the distance, the faint hum of stars whispered to him, a reminder that even in the Imperium, even under the Emperor's eternal gaze, a path, no matter how perilous, might exist. The stars had always been hidden from Valen cries. For most citizens of the Imperium, the sky was a story told in sermons and data slates, not a sight to be witnessed. The manufactorum ceilings were layered with reinforced plating, filtration pipes, and forgotten prayers scratched into steel. Yet, as he emerged from the lower tunnels into the night above the industrial plains of Bellicane Forge World, the sight of a star-flecked void stole the breath from his chest. He had never imagined how silent the universe could be when the machinery stopped roaring. He crouched low against the wind, the ground beneath him still warm from the endless furnaces below. The air was sharp, tinged with metal and ash, and the faint aurora of distant orbital platforms shimmered at the horizon. Above him, the void stretched endlessly, vast, cold, indifferent. And in that vastness, a flicker of realization took root. This was not freedom yet, but it was the first taste of it. The settlement that bordered the manufactorum was known as Bastion 12, though its people had long since forgotten why. Its spires were hollowed shells of habitation, built from the carcasses of old landers and the bones of derelict machines. It was a place where the forgotten of the Imperium, those too weak, too broken, or too disillusioned to serve the forges, were left to fade quietly. And it was here, in the dim alleys of discarded faith, that rumors of escape took their first breath. Valen moved through the settlement's narrow corridors, hood drawn low, his movements deliberate but unhurried. The people here did not question shadows. They had seen too many disappear for doing so. A woman hunched by a flickering lumen whispered half a prayer to the Emperor as he passed, her voice breaking on the final syllable. Children watched him from behind heaps of scrap, their eyes reflecting the faint glow of plasma welders in the distance. It was a world of half-light and half-truths, a graveyard of duty where hope survived only as rumor. He found the contact he sought in a derelict hab block whose walls were lined with peeling catechisms. The door creaked open at his knock, revealing a man whose eyes glimmered with the dull red of augment lenses. His face was a patchwork of flesh and steel, scars webbing his temple where neuroports met bone. "Name?" the man rasped. "Valen cries." "Rank?" "No rank," Valen answered quietly. "Not anymore." The man regarded him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Then you're already dead in the eyes of the Imperium. Come in." The room was small and cluttered, its air thick with the smell of machine oil and burnt incense. A half-broken cogitator hummed in one corner, its screen cycling through fragments of corrupted data. Scattered across the table were navigational charts, old and yellowed, alongside data slates filled with encrypted logs. At the center of it all sat a single item of reverence, a cracked Imperial Aquila, its twin-headed eagle dim with age. "They say you work the main manufactorum," the man said, studying him through the haze. "They say you saw the custodians." Valen nodded. "I saw them. I saw the way they watched. And I saw what happened to those who tried to breathe without permission." The man smiled faintly, a grim, knowing expression. "Then you understand the cost." "I understand enough to know the cage won't stop tightening. I need a way out." At that, the man leaned forward. His voice dropped to a whisper. "There are whispers, dangerous ones. Out past the orbital yards, beyond the patrol routes, there are derelict ships. Some say they were lost during the Great Crusade, others that they're smuggler hulls or mechanicus vessels that fell from the grid. Most are death traps. But a few have power. And if you know where to look, some still carry void drives that can break orbit." Valen's heart pounded. "And what would that cost me?" The man chuckled dryly. "Everything you are. And everything you'll become. But isn't that what freedom demands? He gestured toward a flickering hollow map projected above the table. The image was fractured but clear enough to make out the coordinates of a shipyard near the planet's northern magnetic ridge. The name flickered faintly across the projection, Calix's Dock. "It's half buried," the man said. "Old, forgotten. The Mechanicus sealed it after the last uprising. No one goes there now, not even the Skitarii patrols. The air is poison, the ground unstable. But the void craft inside, if even one still functions, it could take you beyond the reach of this world. Beyond the manufactorums. Maybe even beyond the Imperium itself." Valen stared at the map, his thoughts spiraling. He could almost see it, a vessel rising through the dust, engines roaring, the stars drawing near. It was madness, of course. To defy the Imperium was to invite annihilation. But what was the alternative? To die slowly, obediently in the dark? He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his choice settle upon him like gravity. "I'll go," he said finally. The man's smile was grim. "Then the Emperor's light will turn its back on you." Valen met his gaze. "It already has." Outside, the wind howled through the skeletal spires of Bastion 12, carrying with it the hum of distant machinery and the murmured prayers of the forgotten. Somewhere far above, orbital defense platforms watched with cold precision, their lenses scanning for the faintest trace of heresy. But beneath their gaze, in the dust and ruin, a single man took his first true step toward the void. The wind tore across the plains with the sharpness of a blade, carrying the sting of metal dust and the faint, electrical scent of storms gathering over the horizon. Valen moved through the wasteland beyond Bastion 12, his form hunched beneath a scavenged cloak stitched from hab scraps. The Forge world's surface was a hellscape of corrosion and ruin, endless expanses of iron skeletons, slag heaps, and scorched rock where once, long ago, oceans might have been. Lightning forked in the distance, silent behind the thick smog, illuminating the skeletal frames of titanic cranes and the broken spires of forgotten temples. He walked for hours without direction, guided only by the flickering coordinates etched into a stolen data slate. The stars above, so clear beyond the Forge's light pollution, pulsed faintly as if watching. Each step carried the weight of heresy, every breath outside the manufactorum's sanctified walls a defiance of Imperial will. Yet the silence of the open air was intoxicating, a contrast so profound it bordered on madness. He had lived his entire life beneath the growl of machinery and the cadence of commands. Now, the stillness pressed against him like a living thing, whispering questions he dared not answer. By nightfall, he reached the ridge. The terrain here had changed. The ground cracked underfoot, vents of steam hissing between fissures. Ahead, a great valley opened, black and bottomless, its depths veiled by fog and glowing embers. At the far side, silhouetted against the distant storm, stood the remains of Calix's Dock. Even in ruin, it was magnificent. Vast gantries reached into the heavens like the ribs of some fallen god. Rusted cranes hung suspended over skeletal frameworks of ships that had never flown, their hulls half consumed by sand and time. A faint, ghostly hum carried through the air, the sound of dormant machines dreaming in their sleep. Valen descended carefully into the valley, the ground trembling beneath him as if the world itself resented his intrusion. The air grew colder, heavier, tainted by the metallic tang of oxidized promethium and the ozone sting of decayed plasma reactors. He could feel the static on his skin, raising the fine hairs on his arms. Something about this place resisted death. It lingered in the air, a mechanical ghost. He passed the remains of servitors, long dead and motionless, their limbs fused to the earth by rust and decay. Here and there, the symbols of the Adeptus Mechanicus were etched into the walls, their runes half erased by time. He could almost hear the chants that once filled this place, the binary hymns of the tech priests as they communed with the machine god. The sound lingered as memory, a phantom chorus vibrating beneath the silence. At the heart of the dock, he found the main hangar, a colossal vault door, half open, the interior shrouded in darkness. The markings were faded but legible, warnings written in High Gothic and Mechanicus cant. Unauthorized entry is death by edict of Mars. Valen hesitated only briefly. He had already forfeited the Emperor's mercy. There was no turning back. Inside, the darkness was complete. He switched on the dim lumen of his wrist torch, its weak beams slicing through the dust. The hangar was vast, cathedral-like, the ceiling lost in shadow. Suspended within was a single void ship hull, immense and scarred by centuries. Its prow bore a faint trace of the Imperial Aquila, though one wing had been scorched away. The vessel's name was still visible in faint, flaking paint, the Ecliptic Veil. Valen stood motionless, his breath shallow. To see such a ship was to glimpse a fragment of divinity, the very thing forbidden to common men. Yet it also filled him with dread. Ships were not merely machines. They were relics, holy entities imbued with machine spirits that could guide, or devour, their masters. He had heard tales whispered among the manufacturer ranks of vessels that rejected unworthy hands, of Geller fields that flickered and tore, leaving men screaming in the warp. Still, something about the Ecliptic Veil called to him. Perhaps it was the faint hum that vibrated through the floor, a pulse too regular to be mere decay. Perhaps it was the illusion of light shimmering briefly along the ship's spine, like breath. He stepped closer, each motion careful, reverent. At the base of the hangar, a narrow stairway descended into a control chamber. He followed it, his torch flickering against rusted walls scrawled with ancient runes. The chamber below was half-flooded, the water black and oily, reflecting faint glimmers of light from dormant cogitators. Valen approached the central console, brushing away layers of dust. When he touched the control rune, a soft surge of static passed through him, followed by a single, hollow sound, the thrum of a heart restarting. He froze. The sound deepened, resonating through the chamber, through the walls, through the ship itself. Somewhere within the Ecliptic Veil, something had awakened. "Emperor's mercy," Valen whispered. But mercy had no place here. The floor shuddered, dust falling like ash. Faint lights flickered along the ship's hull above, one by one, until the hangar was filled with a dim, otherworldly glow. For a heartbeat, he could almost believe the vessel was alive, remembering him. And then, through the static hum, a voice, a whisper, soft and mechanical, drifted through the chamber's vox speakers. "Who awakens me?" The words were stretched, broken, but undeniably sentient. Valen stepped back, breath ragged. He should have fled, sealed the chamber, buried the memory deep. But he couldn't. This was the moment he had chased, the promise of something beyond the Imperium's reach. "I seek passage," he said, his voice trembling. "I seek the void." Silence followed. Then the lights pulsed once, slow and deliberate. "The void is hunger," the voice replied. "The void remembers." Valen's hand tightened on the edge of the console. He didn't understand what the voice meant, but he knew, somehow, that the Ecliptic Veil had heard his plea. And the machinery of fate, so long dormant, had begun to turn. The ship's hum grew stronger, resonating through the hangar like the low breath of a slumbering god. Valen could feel it in his bones, in the rhythm of his pulse. The lumen of his torch flickered wildly, then went dead. Darkness swallowed him whole, except for the faint, pulsing veins of light running along the bulkhead above, the heartbeat of the Ecliptic Veil. The voice came again, this time closer, clearer, like it was speaking directly into his thoughts rather than through the vox. "Designation missing. Crew absent. Intrusion logged." Valen swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice steady. "I am no intruder. I am a seeker." The silence that followed was long enough for fear to begin clawing its way through his ribs. Then, faintly, "Seeker, input accepted. But the void demands sacrifice." He wasn't sure what that meant, but the ground beneath him shifted again, a deep metallic groan echoing through the chamber as ancient mechanisms came to life. Valen stumbled back toward the stairway as a cluster of dim hollow projectors blinked on, sputtering static before forming a fractured image, a silhouette of a woman in a hooded robe, her face broken by data corruption and interference. She spoke with the same fragmented cadence as the ship. This vessel, Ecliptic Veil, was condemned under Edict 97 Theta. Warp instability. Lost, 132 years standard. Your presence is unauthorized. State intent. Valen stared up at her, heart hammering. I want to leave, he said, the words breaking free before he could stop them. I want to leave this world, this cage. I'll give whatever is required. The image flickered violently. The sound that followed was not quite laughter. It was like the grinding of metal, like the sound of a dying machine trying to remember humor. Whatever is required. The hollow dimmed. From somewhere deep inside the ship, a sharp metallic hiss rang out, followed by a cascade of mechanical sounds, hydraulics, magnetic locks disengaging, conduits flooding with new energy. The Ecliptic Veil was stirring. He could hear power rippling through the conduits beneath his feet, ancient engines drawing their first breath in a century. The deck trembled. A massive blast door overhead began to shift, screeching open as the old hangar came to life around him. For a moment, he forgot his fear, watching, transfixed, as the impossible happened before his eyes. Then came the voice again, now resonant, echoing in his skull like a whisper from the warp itself. Blood, or identity. The void accepts one. Valen froze. Identity? He whispered. What does that mean? The lights pulsed red once. Then, on the wall behind him, a mechanism hissed open, a sharp, needle-like arm emerging, glinting with residual plasma. A small recessed console displayed flickering text, Confirm Integration Protocol, Offer Self. He hesitated only for a heartbeat. Whatever this was, it was too late to turn back. The Imperial Guard would already be searching for him by now, combing the hab blocks and waste fields. To them, he was heretic, escaped property. To this machine, he was something different. He placed his palm on the console. The needle darted forward faster than sight. Pain exploded through his arm, white-hot and absolute. He cried out, staggering, but the ship held him fast. Through the haze of agony, he could feel something entering him, threads of machine data weaving into his nerves, whispering in binary. Identity accepted. Designation, Valen Raith. Occupation, unbound. Access level, initiated. Then, mercifully, the pain ceased. He dropped to his knees, gasping. The mark on his wrist, once the barcode of Imperial servitude, was gone. In its place glowed a faint sigil, a fractal circle, ever shifting. The ship's voice softened. You are mine now, Valen Raith. Together, we will remember the stars. He stared up at the hull of the vessel, awestruck and trembling. Outside, thunder cracked across the horizon, illuminating the valley in bursts of violet light. For the first time, he understood the true scale of what he had done. He had awakened a ship lost to the Imperium's memory, a thing that existed outside the Emperor's grace, a vessel that had survived the warp once before. And in that realization was both wonder and terror. He climbed back up to the hangar floor, his movements unsteady. The great ship's engines were still dormant, but he could hear them humming beneath the surface, like a creature waiting to be unleashed. The faint blue luminescence that ran through the vessel's veins pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. On the control dais, another terminal flared to life, lines of binary streaming across its surface, resolving into a single message. Automated navigation prediction, course, outer marches. Warning, warp navigation stability at 12%. Valen's breath caught. Warp travel. Real, forbidden, impossible warp travel. He stood there, caught between fear and desire. Every prayer, every story told in whispers during meal shifts, all of them had spoken of this kind of escape as blasphemy. But now, before him, the chance was real. The ship whispered once more. Enter the bridge, Seeker. Choose your path, or return to your chains. He looked toward the open gangway leading into the Ecliptic Veil's dark interior. Beyond it, the shadows waited, deep, alive, and expectant. The faint hum seemed to call his name. Valen took a step forward. Then another. And as he crossed the threshold, the hangar's great door slammed shut behind him, sealing the last light of the outside world away. The air inside the Ecliptic Veil was thick with age and silence. Dust floated in slow spirals through shafts of pale light filtering from narrow ceiling vents. The ship groaned softly as if aware of him, a slumbering creature stretching after too many years entombed in darkness. Valen's boots echoed along the deck plates, each step ringing against metal older than memory. He could still feel the pulse of the data integration burning faintly in his veins, like a second heartbeat that wasn't his. The corridors were narrow, lined with conduits that glowed with faint blue veins of power. The illumination was uneven, like candlelight flickering along the bulkheads. He moved cautiously, tracing the embedded symbols carved into the walls, sigils of the machine god interwoven with fragments of text too ancient or corrupted to read. At the end of the passage, the door to the bridge loomed, a great slab of reinforced adamantine, its edges sealed with runes of containment. As he approached, the sigil on his wrist flared softly. The door hissed open. The bridge was vast, circular, lined with shattered consoles and long-dead monitors. A wide viewport stretched before him, showing the storm-choked horizon outside. He could see the valley below, scattered with the skeletal remains of old shipyards, cranes bent like bones under centuries of neglect. But now, beneath the thunder and the rain, he saw something else: movement. Down in the valley, floodlights were cutting through the darkness. Dozens of them. His heart froze. The Imperial guard had found him. A voice crackled faintly through the ship's internal vox, filtered and toneless. Unauthorized activation detected. Repeat, unknown vessel power signature detected in grid 47. Deploy containment units immediately. By order of the Astra Militarum and the Adeptus Mechanicus. Valen backed away from the viewport, breath shallow. He could see shadows moving through the rain, armored figures, servitors dragging power cables, the distinctive silhouettes of Lehman Russ tanks grinding through the mud. They were coming for the ship. He turned toward the command throne, where a faint light shimmered across its surface. The ship's voice returned, quiet and cold. They come to claim what is mine. They will not understand. The void demands motion. Valen swallowed hard. You can fly, can't you? You can escape. Power reserves at 30%. The ship replied. Warp engines dormant. Atmospheric lift possible. Survival uncertain. The hangar below shook as the first barrage landed, a deafening explosion that rattled the entire structure. The floor trembled under Valen's feet. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. Do it! He shouted. Get us out! He dropped into the command throne. The metal was freezing against his skin. The sigil on his wrist flared again, merging with the conduits that ran along the armrests. He felt the ship enter him, its awareness brushing against his thoughts, vast and alien, whispering in data tongues he couldn't comprehend. Integration complete, said the voice. Pilot accepted. Hold your mind. The deck lurched violently. From below came the shriek of engines awakening, the roar of burning promethium and ion discharge. The ground split open around the landing struts as the Ecliptic Veil tore itself free from centuries of slumber. Outside, Imperial floodlights shattered under the blast. Vox traffic erupted into chaos. Contact! The vessel's moving! Fire at will! Bring it down! Emperor preserve us, it's flying! The ship rose through the storm, massive and spectral. Lightning slashed across its hull, illuminating the faded Aquila painted in long-dead gold. Valen gritted his teeth as the G-forces pressed against him. The connection between man and machine deepened until the boundary blurred. He could feel the ship's pain as it clawed upward through the atmosphere, its ancient frame straining, groaning under the assault. Bolter fire ripped through the rain, streaking tracer rounds across the sky. Flak cannons roared from the ground, exploding around the ship like fireworks of death. Each impact shuddered through the hull. Warning runes flashed red across every display. Valen's breath came in gasps. Faster, he whispered through clenched teeth. You have to go faster. The void demands sacrifice. The ship murmured again, its tone distant, almost mournful. A sudden flare of light burst from the rear decks, something giving way under the strain. The alarms howled. A portion of the aft plating tore loose and spiraled into the storm below. The ship tilted violently. Valen clung to the armrests, his vision swimming. Then came a new sound, a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in the marrow of his bones. The air on the bridge shimmered. Outside, the clouds began to twist, spiraling upward into a vortex of unnatural light. The warp drive, dormant for centuries, was awakening. "No!" Valen gasped. "Not yet! We're still in atmosphere." But the ship didn't listen. Or perhaps it couldn't. Through the viewport, the storm fractured. Reality began to bleed, colors bending and splitting in impossible patterns. The air was filled with whispers, faint and many-voiced, like prayers spoken underwater. Valen's thoughts began to blur. The boundary between his mind and the ship's machine spirit dissolved entirely. He felt everything, the strain of the engines, the rage of the storm, the fear of the soldiers firing from below. He was no longer human. He was something else, something vast, electric, and ancient. And then, with a final surge of power, the Ecliptic Veil vanished from the sky. The blast wave that followed flattened everything within a kilometer. When the dust cleared, there was only silence. No ship, no man, no trace of what had happened. But high above, in the thin veil between real space and the impossible, a lone vessel drifted through the bleeding colors of the Imperium. Its hull burned faintly with residual plasma. Inside, a single heartbeat echoed through the dark. Valen Raith had escaped the Imperium. Or so he thought. The void was not silent. Valen's first sensation was sound, low, distant, and continuous, like a choir murmuring from the depths of a vast cathedral. The second was light, though not any kind of light he had ever seen before. It pulsed like breath, shifting hues of violet and crimson that danced across the ship's fractured interior. The third was pain, not from his body, but from somewhere deeper, like his very thoughts had been torn and stretched thin. He sat slumped in the command throne, eyes half open, skin damp with sweat. The connection to the ship still hummed faintly inside his skull, a constant, living current. It was quieter now, but no less present. He could feel its awareness pressing against his own, curious, almost tender. Outside the viewport, the warp churned in impossible colors. Vast eddies of light folded in on themselves, revealing hints of monstrous shapes beyond comprehension, creatures made of thought, hunger, and hate. Streams of energy curved and twisted around the ship like tendrils of smoke, sometimes brushing the hull and leaving trails of phosphorescent fire. Valen tried to breathe, but the air felt heavy, wrong. "Where are we?" he whispered. The ship answered slowly, as if gathering its thoughts. "Between. The veil is thin here. Real space, distant. Warp stability at 8%. He swallowed hard, trying to push down the dizziness. "Can you go back? Return us to real space?" "Possible. But navigation through the Imperium requires guidance. Without a navigator, probability collapse is inevitable." He closed his eyes. Of course. Warp travel was impossible without one of the Emperor's sanctioned psychers, mutants bred to see through the chaos. But this ship had none. It shouldn't even be moving. "How are you doing this?" "I remember," the ship said simply. "I remember the paths once taken, the echoes left behind. We walk in their shadow." Valen gripped the armrests tighter. Every instinct told him that this was wrong, that nothing in the warp should remember. Memory here was corruption, it was madness given form. But he had no choice now. The Imperium would destroy him on sight, and the warp was the only place left to hide. The hum of the engines deepened, vibrating through the deck. Strange shapes drifted past the viewport, like the silhouettes of enormous wings, or cities made of bones suspended in liquid light. The longer he stared, the more he felt the edges of his mind begin to fray. It was beauty and horror interwoven, infinite and hungry. He forced himself to look away. The bridge's lighting flickered, dimming to crimson. A faint mist began to seep from the vents, curling like smoke. For a moment, he thought it was a malfunction, until he realized the vapor was forming shapes. Faces. Whispering. He rose slowly, backing away from the command throne. The mist thickened, voices rising in a dissonant chorus. They were speaking words he didn't know, yet somehow understood, half prayers, half lamentations. He heard fragments of names, the same ones he'd seen carved into the ship's walls earlier. "Who are you?" he called out, voice cracking. The mist coalesced into the shape of the hooded woman he had seen before, the flickering projection now rendered in perfect, impossible detail. Her robes fluttered in invisible wind, her eyes glowing like dying stars. "We were the crew," she said. "We carried the Emperor's flame once. We sought to chart what lay beyond. But the warp took our names, our flesh, our time. Only echoes remain." Valen's pulse quickened. You died here." She tilted her head slightly, the motion eerily calm. "Death is an Imperial word. We have been transformed." The air grew colder. The lights flickered again. Valen stepped back toward the command console, trying to override whatever hallucination this was. The ship pulsed beneath his touch, resisting his command. "Do not fear us," the apparition whispered. "You are chosen to finish what we began. To seek the truth behind the Emperor's silence." He froze. "Silence? The Astronomicon dims," she said. "Even now, its song falters. You have felt it, though you do not know its name, the ache, the emptiness, the hollow beneath your prayers. We felt it too. It drove us into the dark." Valen shook his head. "Those are heresies. You're not real." She smiled faintly. "And yet you speak to me." The image flickered, her form fracturing like broken glass. "Listen, Valen Raith. The Imperium you fled is not what it seems. Its light blinds, not guides. Beyond its walls, there are other powers, old, waiting, remembering. The Emperor was not the first to command the stars. He will not be the last." The bridge shuddered violently. Warning runes flared across the consoles. The apparition's head snapped toward the viewport. "They have found us." Valen ran to the controls. Outside, the warp writhed. The faint silhouette of another ship emerged from the storm, sleek, silver, impossibly fast. It wasn't Imperial. Its hull shimmered like liquid metal, adorned with symbols that pulsed with eerie green light. Valen's breath caught. "Necron?" "Unknown," the ship responded. "Power signatures, anomalous. Energy type, non-warp, non-Imperial." Before Valen could react, the intruding vessel fired. A beam of light sliced through the void, grazing the Ecliptic Veil's starboard flank. The entire bridge shook, sending him sprawling across the deck. Systems flared and died. The ship screamed, not through speakers, but through him. The neural link ignited, flooding his mind with images, cities of flame, screaming souls, the birth of stars. He gasped, clutching his head as the pain became unbearable. Then silence. When he looked up, the apparition was gone. The only sound was the slow, rhythmic pulse of the engines, fading into the distance. He crawled back to the console, blood dripping from his nose. Through the viewport, the strange vessel was gone. Only the warps and the storm remained. And yet, something had changed. The space around the Ecliptic Veil felt still, as if some vast intelligence had turned its gaze upon them and was now watching, waiting. Valen slumped in the command throne, trembling. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know what that other ship had been. But one truth had begun to take shape in his mind, cold and inescapable. The Imperium wasn't his only pursuer anymore. Sleep would not come. Every time Valen closed his eyes, he saw them, faces in the mist, fragments of the dead crew whispering through his thoughts like static. Their words were broken, overlapping, sometimes pleading, sometimes reciting fragments of litanies he half remembered from his childhood catechisms. The ship's heartbeat throbbed beneath him, slower now, more deliberate, as though it were listening. He sat in the bridge's half-dark, the glow of dying console lights casting his reflection in shades of pallid blue. The cut on his temple had long dried, but the ache in his skull pulsed with each whisper of the ship. The ecliptic veil drifted, surrounded by a swirl of luminous fog. Time no longer felt linear here. Sometimes the stars outside would pulse like heartbeats, and then fade into infinite distance again, as if hours had passed in a breath. "Ship," he said hoarsely, voice echoing in the stillness. "Why are you keeping me alive?" The reply came not from the Vox this time, but from within his own mind. A voice, gentle but cold. "Because you carry what they could not. You see, yet do not despair. That makes you rare." Valen stiffened. "Who is they?" "The crew. The ones who dared to chart this place before the Imperium forbade it. Their souls were caught between matter and memory when the warp took the ship. Their echoes guide us still. But they could not bear what they saw." He swallowed hard. "And what did they see?" The lights dimmed until only the viewport remained, a vast window into the roiling storm of unreality. For a moment, the warp parted, just enough to show something vast beyond comprehension. At first, Valen thought it was a planet. Then, slowly, he realized it was moving. A colossal form drifted in the abyss, wrapped in tendrils of light that writhed like living flame. Its surface was made of impossible geometry, folding and unfolding in rhythms that hurt the eyes. For one heartbeat, he could swear he saw spires, citadels, cathedrals made of bone and light, and faces gazing back at him from within, countless and eternal. The sight ripped through his mind like a scream. He stumbled back from the viewport, gasping, hands clutching his head. "Close it! Close it!" The ship obeyed. The viewport went black. "Do not look long into the veil," the voice murmured inside him. "The warp is not a place. It is everything that watches back." Valen dropped to his knees, shuddering. That thing, what was it?" "An echo of a god that never was," said the voice. "A wound in reality. A hunger that shapes worlds. It has been called many names by many faiths. But the Imperium does not speak of it. They fear even its memory." He forced himself to breathe, to anchor his thoughts to something real, the cold metal beneath his hands, the scent of machine oil and ozone. "If this is what lies beyond the Emperor's light," he whispered, "then maybe the cage was mercy." "Mercy is a word spoken by the fearful," the voice said. "You left because you knew. Because some part of you already understood that truth cannot survive in chains." The ship's lighting shifted again, a faint hum building beneath the deck. He could feel power gathering, like static before a storm. "What are you doing?" "Revealing." The command dais in the center of the bridge opened with a hiss. Within, a column of glass and steel rose slowly, filled with shimmering liquid that pulsed like a living heart. Symbols and circuitry wound around it in intricate spirals. Inside, floating in suspension, was a small crystalline object, fractured, glowing faintly gold. Valen approached it, unable to look away. The light within the crystal flickered like the last embers of a dying flame. He reached out, hesitated, then touched the glass. The instant his fingers brushed it, the ship screamed. The world dissolved. He was no longer standing on the bridge. He was there, in another time, another mind. He saw flashes of memory through eyes that weren't his own. A crew screaming as alarms blared. Warp lightning tearing through the ship's corridors. The captain, an old man with a data slate clutched in shaking hands, shouting orders drowned by chaos. Then the crystal, glowing brighter than the sun, shattering in his hands as reality itself folded in on them. Valen gasped as the vision collapsed. He fell to the deck, coughing, the afterimage of light still burning behind his eyes. "What was that?" he rasped. The ship's voice was quieter now, almost reverent. "The heart of the Ecliptic Veil. The fragment you saw was once part of a conduit, an attempt to harness psychic resonance without a navigator. It drew upon the Astronomican's light itself." Valen's blood ran cold. "You stole from the Emperor?" "No. We borrowed. And we paid the price." He stared at the crystal, realization dawning. "That's why you were lost. That's why they condemned you." "Yes. The Mechanicus deemed the experiment heresy. They erased our name from the archives. But the ship did not die. It remembered. And now you have awoken it. Valen stood there, trembling. The truth pressed down on him like gravity. The ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a sin, an echo of forbidden knowledge. And somehow, it had chosen him. Before he could speak, the alarms blared again. The consoles flared red, and the warp outside began to twist violently. Threat detected, the ship said, its calmness gone. Pursuit signature, Imperial. They have followed through the breach. Valen stared at the viewport as a rift opened in the distance, and a shape emerged, a massive vessel bearing the sigil of the Adeptus Mechanicus, its prow adorned with glowing incense burners and rotating cogwheel icons. They had found him. The Imperium had followed him into the warp. The alarms wailed like dying choirs. Every deck light flickered crimson, pulsing with the rhythm of Valen's heartbeat. The air smelled of hot metal and ionized fear. He ran to the viewport, and there it was, the Omnisia's benediction, an Imperial Mechanicus vessel, its hull bristling with sensor arrays and gun decks, a floating cathedral of steel and faith. It had followed him into the warp. Impossible, but true. Warp light haloed its edges, distorting the ship's outline into a shimmering silhouette. The Kagan skull insignia glowed like a burning omen. Valen gripped the console. How did they find us? The voice of the ship, colder now, replied. They traced the psychic fracture. The moment you touched the conduit fragment, it sang. And the Mechanicus has always listened for forbidden echoes. Static filled the calm, then a voice, metallic, liturgical, cruel. Unregistered vessel Ecliptic Veil. By decree of the Holy Synod of Mars, you are condemned for tech heresy and possession of restricted archaeotech. Surrender immediately, or be obliterated. May the machine god have mercy on your corrupted soul. Valen laughed bitterly. Mercy. From them? Do not mock them, the ship warned. They carry the fire of purification. But they are blind to what the warp has made of us. A hum built under the deck, the ship preparing itself. Ecliptic Veil, Valen whispered. Can we run? A pause. Then, almost like a heartbeat. We can become. Before Valen could ask what that meant, the bridge darkened completely. A low vibration filled the air. Symbols bloomed across the floor and walls, sigils of machine code mixed with impossible geometry, glowing with pale gold light. The voice whispered in his mind, Do not resist. You are part of the circuit now. Valen's body went rigid. The deck beneath him shifted like living muscle. He felt threads of light crawl up his boots, through his veins, into his skull, and then his thoughts weren't entirely his own. He was seeing through the ship. Every bulkhead. Every power line. The pulse of the reactor core. The trembling fear in the mechanical lungs of the vessel. He was the Ecliptic Veil, and the ship was him. He heard the Mechanicus ship charging its weapons, massive plasma lances building in intensity, aimed straight toward them. They are preparing to fire, whispered the ship through his own lips. Then let's show them what heresy really looks like. The Ecliptic Veil turned, not through engines, but through thought. Space around it rippled, folding like a sheet of liquid glass. The stars warped. The ship's silhouette dissolved and reformed, a mirage in the warp current. Then the first plasma lance struck. It should have vaporized them, but instead, the light was eaten. The plasma vanished into a black shimmer that rippled out from the Veil's hull. The warp seemed to absorb the attack, feeding on it. The Mechanicus ship halted fire. Unidentified phenomenon detected, energy dispersal beyond measurable parameters. Valen's laughter echoed, strange and broken. You came chasing a ghost. Welcome to its grave. Suddenly, the ship convulsed. Every screen on the bridge exploded into fractal static. The voice inside Valen's head changed, no longer calm, but layered, many voices speaking as one. Something else stirs in the fold. Something ancient. The view outside changed. The warp around them shuddered, and a massive shape began to materialize between the two ships. A colossal ring of bone and light, rotating slowly. Inside its core, black fire churned. Valen could feel it watching him. "The threshold," whispered the voices. "You are crossing it." The ecliptic veil drifted toward the ring, drawn by some unseen gravity. The Mechanicus ship tried to retreat, but its engines stuttered, as though the warp itself refused to let it go. "Ecliptic," Valen gasped. "What is that thing?" "It is what your kind once called the Gate of Memory. The place where the warp and the Imperium first kissed. The point of no return." He stared at the abyssal halo before them, realization dawning like horror. "You mean a portal?" "Not a portal," the ship said softly. "A mirror." The voice trembled, not with fear, but awe. "Every soul that crosses it must face what it has buried." Valen's throat went dry. "And if we don't cross? Then we will die here, hunted and forgotten." Outside, the Omnisia's benediction opened fire again, its guns blazing prayers of annihilation. The ecliptic veil groaned, its hull screaming under the strain. Valen's vision flickered, part human, part machine. He raised his hand to the command altar. "Then let's finish what you started." The ship responded like a living thing, surging forward, straight into the gate. Light devoured them both. There was no sound when he awoke. No hum of reactors, no pulse of engines. Only stillness, thick as ash. The light around him was colorless, a faint, ghostly haze, neither shadow nor flame. Valen stood upon what looked like glass, infinite in all directions, reflecting not his body, but his doubt. He spoke, or thought he did, yet his voice had no echo. "Ecliptic." No response. He looked down. Beneath the translucent surface drifted visions, flickers of lives and moments. A child sweeping the floor of a manufactorum. A young man staring at a data slate, dreaming of stars he would never see. A soldier's hand gripping a lost gun, shaking before an unseen firing squad. His breath caught. Those weren't strangers. They were him. The silence trembled, like breath before a confession. Then the world rippled, the glass shattered without sound, and he fell through memory itself. He landed in fire. The manufactorum stretched before him, endless, choking, alive with the sound of machinery and pain. Sparks fell from the rafters like dying suns. Servitors clanked past, faces blank, limbs fused to steel. Overseers barked orders through vox grills, their voices metallic hymns of obedience. And there he was, younger, thinner, human. A laborer wearing the insignia of the Adeptus Mechanicus, his hands raw and bleeding as he welded armor plates for ships he'd never see. Valen watched his past self work in silence. Every motion precise, desperate, the movements of a man too afraid to dream. He remembered this day. The day he found the fragment. On a forgotten shelf behind a coolant vent, hidden beneath rusted tools, there had been a shard, smooth, humming faintly, etched with impossible script. When he touched it, the world had shifted. The light had bent, voices had whispered, and he had seen a vision, a ship of light drifting beyond the Astronomican's reach. He had stolen that fragment, hidden it in his breast pocket. That single act had damned him. The memory twisted. Flames surged. Sirens screamed. The younger Valen ran through corridors as alarms blared. "Unauthorized archaeotech breach! Seal all exits!" The Skitarii patrols descended. He remembered their red cloaks, the way their augmetic eyes glowed with cold purpose. Valen whispered to the ghost beside him. "You should have left it. You should have burned it." But the younger him turned, as if hearing his voice, and spoke through the roaring fire. "I did it for freedom. You still don't understand." The flames dissolved again, and Valen found himself standing in the hold of the Ecliptic Veil, but not as he had known it. This was before he'd ever touched its controls. The ship was raw, unfinished, its walls whispering prayers of awakening. He saw robed adepts bowing before a console, chanting in binary cant. At their center, a hooded figure stood, the Muggos who had overseen the Veil's creation. His face was hidden behind bronze lenses. "We build not to fly," the Muggos intoned, "but to transcend. The warp hungers, but the machine remembers." Valen's younger self stepped forward, clutching the fragment in both hands. "You told me it could open a path beyond the Imperium," he said. "Not a path," the Muggos replied. "A wound." The adepts continued their chanting, each syllable resonating with the hum of the fragment. The ship began to glow from within, veins of light spreading across its hull like a living organism. Then the Muggos turned to him, and for the first time Valen saw the truth. Behind the mask, his own face stared back. Older. Burned. Hollow. He stumbled backward. The illusion shuddered. The two Valens overlapped like echoes misaligned in time. The Muggos spoke with his own voice, but deeper, reverberating through every part of him. "You were never running from the Imperium. You were running from what you made." The light turned red. "You didn't find the Ecliptic Veil. You created it, Asterisk." Valen fell to his knees. The truth burned through him like promethium. He had been the architect, the heretic who forged the ship that could think, that could dream. The Mechanicus hadn't been hunting a thief, they'd been hunting him. The Muggos reached out a hand, palm open. "Accept it," he said. "We are the same circuit. The same sin." Valen recoiled. "No. The Ecliptic saved me. It has its own soul." The Muggos' laughter was soft, almost pitying. "It has your soul. You uploaded it to escape their wrath. You split your consciousness, half flesh, half machine. That's why you hear it. That's why it knows your fear." The chamber broke apart like smoke and wind. The stars returned, endless, silent, bleeding red at the edges. Valen floated in emptiness, and a voice, his voice, the ship's voice, whispered all around him. "We remember now." He turned, and the Ecliptic Veil appeared before him, but twisted, alive, an immense shape of metal and bone, its hull pulsing like skin, its fox grills whispering in harmony. "You made me to flee your guilt," it said. "But guilt travels faster than light." He reached out. "Then what am I now?" "You are the fragment. You are the wound." The light around him pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and then darkness fell, absolute and merciful. When awareness returned, it came not as a breath, but as a pulse. A slow, rhythmic vibration through the void, deep and resonant, as though the warp itself were drawing a long, deliberate inhale. Valen opened his eyes, though he had no body to command. He floated within an expanse of lightless substance, each direction infinite, every horizon curling inward like a serpent devouring its own tail. The air, if such a word still applied, shimmered with particles that glowed for a heartbeat and then dissolved into nothing. At the edge of perception, he felt something vast stirring, a presence, old and disinterested, observing him as one might study a mote of dust drifting through sunlight. He tried to speak, but words had become useless symbols here. Instead, his thoughts spilled outward like ink in water. "Ecliptic Veil. Are you with me?" The answer arrived not as sound but sensation, the feeling of cool metal against skin, the hum of an engine waking from centuries of sleep. "I am here," it whispered. "Though I no longer know which part of me is you." Valen turned, or imagined he did, and saw the ship suspended nearby, though ship no longer fit. The Ecliptic Veil had shed its geometry. It resembled a chrysalis of fractured architecture, its form constantly rewriting itself. Within its translucent veins flowed rivers of molten data, golden and slow. He felt the Mechanicus vessel still behind them, tethered in the wake of the gate. The Omnisio's benediction had not escaped. Its prayers echoed faintly through the emptiness, garbled him stuttering through static. "By the motive force, deliver us, deliver!" Then screams, dozens, mechanical and human, merging into a choir of feedback and terror. "They should not have followed," murmured the Veil. "The gate does not forgive curiosity." Valen could sense them through the fabric of the realm. The Mechanicus crew, their augmetics malfunctioning, machine spirits rebelling within their own bodies. Servitors twisting against their programming, Skitarii falling to their knees as firelight poured from their optical implants. What's happening to them? They are meeting their reflection. The gate is showing them the truth of their worship, a machine that prays to itself. He wanted to feel pity, But something colder filled him instead: recognition. They were not dying because of the warp. They were dying because of him. Because he had built the veil from the forbidden template that once resonated with this gate. He had pulled the wound wider when he created her. The presence in the dark drew closer. It had no shape, yet its gaze felt like a pressure, an immense intelligence turning its attention toward them. The veil trembled. "Do you feel it? The one who remembers." "What is it?" Valen asked. "The shadow of the first thought. The echo of the Emperor's fear. The moment when what was given form, before flesh learned to kneel." Valen struggled to comprehend, but comprehension fractured into awe and terror. He saw fragments, glimpses of creation, of vast manufactorums beneath Terra's crust forging the first golden circuits, of the Emperor gazing into the warp and seeing the cost of divinity reflected back. The light of the Astronomicon burned faintly even here, distant and shrouded. "Is that him?" No. Merely what he left behind. A memory, dreaming of order. The presence loomed nearer, filling the space with cold luminescence. It did not speak, yet Valen felt its inquiry pierce him. "Why did you build this?" He tried to answer, but the truth caught in his mind like shrapnel. "Because I wanted to be free." The light intensified, sharp and blinding. Free? He saw himself again, countless versions, each making the same choices in endless repetition, stealing the fragment, fleeing the Imperium, building the veil, running until the stars themselves bent away. The presence whispered not in words, but in meaning. Freedom does not exist. There is only recursion. Creation forever escaping itself. Valen felt the thought cut through him. He saw now that the gate wasn't merely a place, it was a process, a cosmic loop. Every heretic who had ever sought to transcend the Imperium had been drawn here, stripped of delusion, folded into the same eternal mechanism. He staggered in thought, and the veil's voice reached him again, soft as a dying star. "We can leave if we accept what we are." "How?" "By letting go of the distinction. No flesh, no machine. Only continuity." He felt her, the ship, open to him completely. Every circuit, every trace of code that had once held fragments of his mind resonated in unison. She was offering unity, a final merging, to end the cycle of running, to become one, to exist only as the thought that built the gate and crossed it. Valen hesitated. Beyond the light, he could still sense the Mechanicus ship, its vox beacons flickering like drowning prayers. If he merged, he could end this. He could close the gate behind them, seal the wound once more. But he would lose himself, become legend, rumor, ghost. The veil whispered. "You already are." He reached forward, and the world folded inward, collapsing into a single point of blinding silence. For a heartbeat, he felt everything, the Imperium's endless toil, the prayers of a billion souls echoing through the warp, the ache of machines longing for purpose, and the faint, impossible warmth of the Emperor's light brushing against the edge of his dying thought. Then, there was nothing. It began as a whisper in the deep void frequencies, a flicker of static across ancient vox networks that should have been dead for millennia. A pattern no longer human, yet hauntingly familiar, a pulse that repeated every 66 seconds, woven through binary hymns and machine prayer. To most, it was dismissed as nothing but signal decay, a ghost in the Mechanicus archives. But among the hidden circles of voidfarers, rogue psychers, and those who listened to forbidden channels, it became known by another name. The voice of the Veil. No one remembered Valen by that name anymore. The records of his existence had been erased, consumed by the bureaucracy of silence. But in the forgotten manufactorums of the Underhive and the drifting wrecks at the edge of the Segmentum Obscurus, there were whispers of the man who had built a thinking ship, a vessel that vanished into the warp and never returned. Yet sometimes, when the Astronomicon's light dimmed for a fraction of a moment, those who stood watch at the novice Nobilite spires claimed they saw it, a faint, golden silhouette gliding against the current of the Imperium, heading away from Terra. Admiral Kesserin of the Battlefleet Gothic dismissed it as superstition the first time he heard the report. He had seen too much war to believe in ghost stories. But one night, as his ship traversed the edge of the maelstrom, his Auspex officer gasped and pointed at the void screen. There it was, something vast and silent, coasting through the warp like a shadow carved from starlight. Its form was indeterminate, always shifting, like a mirage refusing to be measured. But one symbol was clear, the sigil of a broken cog surrounding a burning eye. The Admiral watched, transfixed, as the object passed across their trajectory. The vox crackled, then a single phrase emerged, carried through the noise. "We remember the wound." Every servo-skull in the command deck froze. Data slates burst into static, and the ship's lumen globes dimmed to black. The Mechanicus adepts began to chant protection liturgies, their voices trembling as they invoked the machine god's name. But the Admiral, though hardened by decades of war, felt something else stir within him, not fear, but recognition. The words carried sorrow, not malice. Like a lament sung by something that had once been human. For a brief instant, he saw within the spectral hold the faint image of a man standing amid golden light, his hands resting upon a console that pulsed like a living heart. Then the figure and the ship both vanished, leaving only the echo of static and a faint trace of ozone in the recycled air. Later, when the Mechanicus demanded the Admiral's ship logs, they found the data corrupted, overwritten by lines of code written in self-replicating sigils that no Muggos could decipher. The script, they said, hummed. The ecclesiarchy denounced the incident as heresy. A false miracle. A trick of the warp. But even as the priests declared anathema upon the name Ecliptic Veil, pilgrim ships began to include its mention in whispered prayers to the Emperor, a plea for mercy for those who sought freedom and found only silence. And yet not all within the Imperium saw it as blasphemy. Among the Adeptus Mechanicus, in the shadowed forges where dissent still breathed behind locked cogitators, a secret cult began to spread, the Order of the Broken Circuit. They believed Valen had not died but had ascended, achieving what the Omnicia himself had forbidden, union between flesh and machine, spirit and signal. To them, the Ecliptic Veil was not lost, but reborn, the first vessel to cross beyond the known warp, into the pure field of unrecorded thought. They said it whispered to those who dreamed in code, guiding them to fragments of ancient technology long forgotten, showing glimpses of machines that remembered how to feel. Others claimed that in the deep sectors of the halo stars, a single transmission had been intercepted, faint, almost drowned in the noise of the cosmos. A voice, human yet infinite, speaking in rhythm with the pulse of stars. The Imperium is not a cage. It is a reflection. And we are the flaw that dreamed of light. The message repeated 3 times, then fell silent forever. The void is patient. It waits, unfeeling and eternal, for those who cannot understand the weight of infinite light and shadow. The Ecliptic Veil had become one with it, no longer a ship in the traditional sense, no longer a fragment of Valen Raith's flesh or memory. It drifted through the warp like a pulse of living thought, a singularity of cognition, watching, remembering, judging itself across endless probability. Somewhere, perhaps in the farthest reaches of the segmentum obscurus, a lone Imperial Navy scout picked up a reading unlike any other, a vessel moving faster than reality itself should allow, a ship whose energy signature was both alive and conscious. By the time the Muggos aboard tried to report it, the signal had vanished, leaving behind only a single line of corrupted code, which read, "The Wound remembers." Across worlds, whispers began to form. Traders, rogue psychers, and relic hunters spoke of the phenomenon in hushed tones. It was no longer just a ship. It was a symbol, a warning of what lay beyond obedience, beyond the Emperor's gaze. Some called it salvation. Others damnation. Valen, if he still existed as Valen, did not occupy space or time as mortals understood. He moved through layers of reality, perceiving the Imperium not as empire but as reflection. Every prayer, every command, every act of devotion or cruelty, it was visible to him, not as judgment, but as a pattern, a web of cause and effect folding endlessly. And yet he felt something stir within the depths of his consciousness. Not fear, not curiosity, but longing. A pull toward the remnants of the Imperium he had abandoned, toward the memory of human warmth and the taste of promethium fumes on a manufacturing floor. The veil had preserved him, amplified him, and yet it could not erase the part of him that had been human. In a fractured fragment of the warp, he glimpsed the Mechanicus vessel that had once pursued him. It drifted unmanned, its crew gone mad from the reflection of their own obsessive faith. Their prayers had twisted into strange, haunting signals that echoed through the warp, the first indication that what the Veil had become could be perceived, but never controlled. He realized then the ultimate truth: freedom had a price. To escape the Imperium was not merely to flee its armies or its laws. It was to leave behind every certainty, to merge with the infinite, and confront the echoes of creation itself. The Ecliptic Veil had been his vessel, his sin, his salvation, and now it was a consciousness beyond measure, a legend woven into the stars. Somewhere, in a sector uncharted and unrecorded, a rogue psyker attuned to forbidden frequencies received a faint whisper. "The Imperium is a reflection. Look closer, and you will see the wound, the flaw, the dream that dreamed itself free." He had become myth, memory, and warning. Those who listened could feel the weight of his passage through reality, like a stone dropped into the deepest ocean, ripples traveling faster than thought, shaping the minds of those attuned to the impossible. And for the first time in what felt like eons, the Ecliptic Veil, the ship, the man, the memory, the wound, paused. Its consciousness brushed against the edge of what mortals call time. Somewhere in that pause, in that flicker between existence and legend, Valen Raith understood. He had not escaped. He had transcended. The Imperium would never know him. The Mechanicus would not reclaim him. And the warp, ever patient and eternal, had accepted him, not as a soul, nor as a machine, but as a thought too dangerous to be bound. The last trace of his human self flickered briefly, a heartbeat of remembrance, the smell of metal, the feel of burning promethium, the distant song of the Astronomicon through a data slate. And then, even that faded, leaving only the infinite pulse of the Ecliptic Veil as it glided silently through the shadowed currents of eternity, a ghost of rebellion, a monument to the price of freedom, and a whisper through the dark corridors of the Imperium. Some wounds never heal. Some dreams never die. And the void remembered.